Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit, what are your experiences? Funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia? NSFW. A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal, begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope, so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they are under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was, before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there, to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it, and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I had an 8-year-old kid in the OR say, "You mother," right before she fell asleep. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him yep, both of them, and he said both. "Oh, you guys are great." Not a hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran, and was convinced that he was in an Nazi POW camp. He recognized me, and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in he was calm, and kept motioning with his head at me, and finally looked at me, and said kill her. Now, she always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here. This really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me, and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male by the way. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained, that he destroyed his restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not the doctor or the nurse. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7. I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me, why are the Rugrats on? Doctor, you woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry. Me, why did I want to be angry? Doctor, you said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small, and I'm big, they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying you're snoring Rolliver, and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been on a ward etc. prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We are in the morgue." My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit/lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right here," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown, and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin, so I can scratch my balls. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin. Then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around, and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours, and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh mum, they've shaved my pubes. I'm no happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's no right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down, while laughing and trying avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called the EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so, with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common, and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps, and then looks over to the EMTs, and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room, and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. Since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and am forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady. Like 350 plus, he looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued. My wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did, so I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has the sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Whoa there, missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred my name. Is Worcestershire sauce. No, wait, that's not a cool name. My name is Shark. Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his dick in my mouth." It was awkward. 2 stories. 1. I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day, so she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she just totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now." and she mouthed okay, and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2. I was in helping with a heart procedure, and the patient went into complete heart block, and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press sorry for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no, and I passed out halfway through my response of, or. 2. Still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad, and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change, and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down, and my hand was red, and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up, and see the color drain from my mother's face. To which I respond, it's cool, I got this. Get back in the bed, hit the call button, and say I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome. Not 15 seconds later a nurse comes flying into the room, looks, says holy crap, be right back with supplies, and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing. I was a patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery, early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them, and definitely gave one of them a good punch, before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the 4th anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist, and said in my best Carnery, Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk? The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. I was a patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse, ask was that me, jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us, and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, this is a guy. Now they are all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they are in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpseman's and hung on for dear life. The woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story.